Hello, you join me and Maddie in the overhead of Sleap airfield with the circuit traffic beneath us as we contact RAF Shawbury to facilitate a military aerodrome traffic zone crossing service. This is going to allow us to route direct to our destination, which is Abbots Bromley Farm strip. Here you'll see our routing and our intended track. Along the way I'll share some of the local points of interest, their history and highlights from the flight. So we've organised our mats crossing now. This is taking us from the Sleap overhead through the mats, remaining outside and between the RAF Shawbury and Turnhill ATZs, and our clearance is not below 2,400 feet. As we get towards the exit point of the mats, we have a disused military airfield. Just coming into view now, just to the left of the rotor RPM gauge, you'll find Peploe. Now Peploe had 3 runways, the longest was 1 mile long. The station was opened in 1941 as originally RAF Childs Arkle, as a satellite station to RAF Turnhill. In 1943 it was renamed RAF Peploe, and as a RAF flying training station it housed in excess of 1,500 RAF personnel and over 350 women of the Auxiliary Air Force. RAF Peploe was a bomber training station and it housed some 30 Hever bomber hard standings. Between 1943 and 1945 RAF Wellington bombers were stationed here, and Peploe was also used by the Heavy Glider Training Unit using the Horsa glider. In 1945 it was transferred to the Fleet Air Arm and renamed HMS Godwick II. In fact, Royal Naval Air Station Peploe opened on the 28th of February 1945, having transferred from 21 Group of the Royal Air Force. It is used by the Central Naval Instrument Flying Training School and the Advanced Single Engine and Refresher Flying Training Unit. The station closed in 1949, becoming a disused airfield, of which you can still see the 3 runways within the grass. Having exited the mats, we now commence a descent. We don't need to be up at 2,500 feet, and particularly in the winter it's a lot colder up there, so we descend to warmer conditions and a place where we can take in the view better. And so our next reference point on our route is Aqua Lake Mere. Just outside Newport, it's the largest natural lake in the English Midlands, managed by Natural England as a national nature reserve and a site of special scientific interest. It was originally formed by glacier meltwater when a kettle hole formed the depression, when a block of dead ice was left behind by the retreating glacier. The surrounding higher ground, made up of glacial sand and gravel deposits, were likely sediment deposits from the meltwater streams. The mere is fed by the surrounding streams, with its outflow to tributaries of the River Severn. Aqua Lake Hall and its associated deer park dates back to the early 17th century. Within the estate you'll find a woodland, the mere and a working garden kitchen. In 1910 the hall was destroyed by a fire, but then rebuilt between 1927 and 1930. Within the grounds you will find 2 Gothic lodges and a red brick house with an attached castellated tower. During the war the estate significantly changed, with arguably an invasion from the Auxiliary Territorial Service, the ATS. This is a women's branch of the Army. Hundreds of women arrived and transformed the grounds into a military transport site, housing thousands of vehicles. Dr. Bernardo's children and staff were also based there. In 1942 there was some 1,500 Army lorries there. Stables were overtaken by 200 men to erect huts. Service roads were put in, leaving less space for the deer, who were known to escape. By March 1943 there was an estimated 5,000 lorries based on the estate. Post-war the Nissan huts formed housing for those under the provision of the local authorities. Over time some 50 families were housed there, and then later moved to more appropriate accommodation and the huts demolished. Today the estate remains in the same family as in the last 200 years or so. Here we use the ground feature of the disused railway line, which is a prominent feature as we handrail it between Newport and Stafford. General rules of the air mean that we keep the reference point to the left, and anybody else coming in the opposite direction should be doing the same, and whenever you're following a line feature on the ground, this keeps aircraft separated. Approaching junction 13 of the M6 now, we can see the large distribution warehouse that was used by Argos. That's a prominent feature for anybody that knows the area. We're just going to route just to the side of Stafford, keeping us clear of the built-up areas. Just to the north of Cannock Chase now, we're not far from our destination of Abbots Bromley. We're approaching our reference of the Shrubber Hall estate. It's located within some 900 acres of parkland. The estate was surrendered to HM Treasury in part payment of inheritance tax duties on the estate of Thomas, 4th Earl of Lichfield, and transferred into the care of the National Trust. The estate's full of history, and within the estate you'll not only find the impressive mansion house that we see to the left of us here, but you'll also find a working park farm, wall gardens, the Tower of the Winds, the Triumphal Arch, a cat monument, a shepherd's monument, and a Chinese house that was built in 1747. Anyone that's not yet visited Shrubber, I definitely recommend a visit. As we approach our destination of Abbots Bromley, first we get to Blissfield Hall, a privately owned Grade 1 listed property, home of the Bagot family since the late 14th century. The present house is mainly Elizabethan with some Gothic additions. In 1945 the property was neglected and sold by Gerald Bagot with its 650 acres to the South Staffordshire Water Company, whose intention was to build a reservoir. This was completed in 1953. The 6th Baron purchased the property back along with 30 acres and started restoration. Unfortunately the 6th Baron died in 1961. In 1986 the house was divided into 4 separate houses. The main part was owned by the Bagot Jewett family, who remain in residence today. Just pointing out to you the landing area now, to the right of us, the Abbots Bromley Farm strip. Some 660 metres in length, as published on the Pooley's Guide, and we are announcing our position approaching downwind on the safety com frequency 135.480. Turning from right base to final now, doing our best to make sure we remain clear of this farm just down to the left of us. No other aircraft in the circuit, and we can't see any other aircraft movements on the ground. We do see a farmer working the field just to the right of us, so we keep a good lookout for anybody that may be straying onto the farm. Runway's typically in very good condition, slight undulation in parts, but not an issue for us. In particular, we come to a stop and land in a very short area. It is a winter's flight, so the ground isn't as firm as it would be in the summer. And then as we land we just get that stick forwards and then apply the rotor brake You see a small windsock situated just to the left. Not in the best of conditions, but does the job. Just going to take this taxiway now just to the left of us, and then we'll come to a halt, just get that rotor to a stop before we taxi through that narrow gap, and then with the rotor stopped we'll proceed to taxi into the parking area. So the plan is just to find ourselves a parking space in here that's not going to inconvenience anybody else should they arrive whilst we're away. So with the aircraft stopped, we shut the aircraft down and then get out. Need to get that rotor tie on, and then it's time to get all the flying kit off, all the winter flying clothes, the helmets, etc. We've got a bag with us, so I can take equipment with us whilst we're away from the aircraft. And then it's time to think about heading off down to the Cobwebs Cafe that we've heard so much about. So the Cobwebs Cafe is a little gem in Abbots Bromley, about a 15-minute walk from the airfield, where we have a bite to eat from a open fire pizza oven. They also sell other sort of street foods between a narrow opening time, so it's also worth checking before you go. There's a butcher's, an antique store and a few other stores there as well. I definitely recommend a visit. So returning to the aircraft, we are suitably fed and watered. We get suited and booted for the flight home, which hopefully you'll join us for in a future video. We've brought ourselves a little treat or two to have at home. For those of you that have watched the Dairy House Farm video, you'll notice that we like a pie, and so we've treated ourselves to a chicken and ham pie and a pork pie with apple. Thanks for watching, and hopefully we'll see you on a future video.